Yippee-Ki-Yay, mother.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Well, welcome to Yippee-Ki-Yay, mother podcast. We got a special one. I'm Ralph Quattrucci.
I'm Sean Paul Murphy.
I'm Debbie Murphy.
I'm John Quattrucci.
And I'm Chris Coker.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Everybody good?
Oh,
Everyone
fantastic.
is great.
Doing well.
My God.
Sean, I see somebody. I see a square that I don't recognize.
What? Who's this?
Who's this? Why don't you introduce our new
This
square
is
here?
this is a great week because we have a horror film classic and a current Hollywood producer with tons of credits, more credits than the producer of Friday the 13th. Frank Mancuso Jr. I think he had 32 credits listed. You had 33, John, as a producer.
Boom.
But what we're mainly here having John Shepard here for is he played Tommy in the 1985 film Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. Yes, John was the new beginning of a horror franchise. And he's here to talk about the movie.
That was Friday the 13th, 5, right?
Yeah, but 5 was not technically in the title.
Right. It's the new beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, great. Well, welcome, John.
Pleasure to be here.
Glad you could join our little pirate ship we call a podcast here. So, Sean, do you want to describe the film first, or should I show a trailer? What do you want to do? How do you
Let me describe it very briefly.
Okay.
So in Friday the 13th, part 4, the final countdown, there was a character played by Corey Feldman whose name was Tommy. And at the end of the film, he hacked Jason Voorhees, the killer, the hockey mask killer, to death in the doorway to protect his sister and family. This film takes place, I assume, 12 years later, and Corey Feldman had strangely grown into John Shepard, and John was the current, Tommy. But Tommy was very disturbed by having to hack Jason to death. So he ends up like in a mental institution. And at the start of this film, he is being sent to a halfway house, which is oddly enough, just like one of these camps that Jason used to haunt. And suddenly,
meaning what? Lots of teenagers having
lots
sex
of teenagers who like to have sex and take their shirts off.
Right.
Normal camp stuff.
Sure.
And suddenly a series of murders begins. And we begin to wonder whether it's Jason back or perhaps the monosyllabic Tommy. Mm-hmm. Is he channeling Jason? Has he become Jason? Is he indeed the new beginning?
If the memory of Jason still haunts you, you're not alone. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning.
Severe trauma at age 12. Brutal self-defense, murder of a psychopathic killer. Boy, they've given him every therapy they can think of. It's wonder his mind isn't fried with all the drugs they've given him.
The mindless, murderous fury that was buried with Jason has been reborn.
Pete!
And suddenly, terror has become child's play. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning.
Okay. So many questions.
Trailer, make a liar out of me.
Yeah, there it was.
Apparently everywhere else, Part 5 is not part of the official title, but on the trailer it is. So
Trailers.
So John, how did it feel watching that trailer again?
Jason still haunts me. That was clearly what I got from it.
Okay, okay.
That was, go.
Yeah, the first question is, what was the audition like? Because you had 24 words in the whole film, something like that. What was your audition like?
Such an interesting journey because, first of all, when you audition for Friday the 13th, they don't tell you that it's a Friday. They say it's a untitled Paramount picture. In this case, it was called Repetition. And so I went in going, how cool. I always get cast in the John Ritter, Boy Next Door, Richie Cunningham, nice kid type roles. Here's a kid coming out of an insane asylum into a halfway house. He doesn't speak the whole movie. And so they gave me these, sides, just pages from the script. And I have no lines. I just have to sweat and be frightened. And I have to be somewhat disturbed. And I thought, well, I was studying at Strasberg at the time. This is a great acting exercise. So I literally went into the audition in character. I decided if I was going to play this, I couldn't be my normal extroverted, outgoing fraternity boy, UCLA self. I had to become a method actor. So I went in character. I would run up and down the fire escape, the stairs, part of my audition. Then I'd come in the waiting room and they'd call my name. I'd go in and I'd sit and I wouldn't look anybody in the eye and I'd just sweat. And I got like 4 or 5 callbacks before I found out it was a Friday the 13th. And I was like, oh, I thought this was Boo Radley and To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm Robert Duvall. Instead, I'd never seen a Friday the 13th, quite honestly. So that was a journey too, to have the privilege of playing Corey as a teenager, but not having seen his work, I had to go and watch part 4 in a theater at Paramount by myself, which was also a frightening experience. So cool.
Yeah. So you must have had a big agent or something to get you in this audition.
My agent was an old school Hollywood guy named Fred Amzell, and he used to say, "Stick with me, kid. You'll wear diamonds as big as oranges." And one of his clients was Barbie, and he would say, "John, I have this client, Barbie, dollface, I call her, dollface. Stick with me." He was just a real interesting old school Hollywood guy, and again, they all thought. Because of my classical training coming out of Northwestern, I came out here to do a TV pilot, and I'd been cast in all kinds of interesting theater roles, being a Chicago improv guy, Second City, even as a teenager. To suddenly get a slasher picture, one of the things I said I'd never do when I go to Hollywood is slasher pictures and lame, cheesy Christian films. And, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. And so the first film I get offered is Friday the 13th. So all my buddies back in Chicago harassed me until they saw the movie and said, "Yeah, you were pretty good." I didn't know you do martial arts. So anyway, a little movie magic. It was a lot of fun. It was a great role, and I really prepared for it. I actually went and worked at a state mental institution for about a month and a half before I started the role, just to get a feel for what it would be like to live and be and come out of, and what those kids were like. So that was a really interesting, eye-opening experience too.
I bet. Oh my. Well, your physicality, you mentioned the martial arts. You definitely look like you knew how to fight in this one, for sure.
Well, it was, I had a lot of time to work out leading up to that role. And also I had a great stunt double. I had Eddie Matthews, who I've remained friends with to this day. Dick Warlock was a stunt coordinator. So we did a lot of rehearsal and training. And I also, like I said, not only for the audition, but when I went out to set, I resolved to stay in character the entire movie, because I thought if people figure out I'm just a nice guy, an outgoing friend, I'm just acting, they're going to treat me like an actor. But if I actually go out there like there's something a little off about this guy, he doesn't talk to anybody, he's monosyllabic himself, it gave me a little bit of an aura that kind of worked on screen, where they did treat me differently. I did sit a lot in my dressing room, working out, push-ups in the barn, running all the time, sweating all the time. But it actually really lent itself well to the role. And I thought the work was actually some of the best work I've done. I really enjoyed Danny Steinman as a director, really let me kind of own the role. And that was a lot of fun too.
You did that one, you flipped that one guy in that,
grunts basically in the whole film. That was a real challenge.
You flipped a guy in that house. There's a flip you did. You grabbed that guy, flipped on the table. Or something.
That was
an amazing day. That was an amazing day because Dick Warlock was saying that, John, you're going to have to grab this kid. You're going to pick him up. Now, you won't grab the actual actor. We'll have Eddie do it. Eddie Matthews. This is Eddie. And I was trying to stay in character and not engage, just listen and look off into the distance and have that, that what they call
1,000-mile stare.
Yeah, 1,000-mile stare. But he was such a nice guy. He kept saying, John, you're going to do this. And don't worry, Eddie's going to do a handstand on your shoulder. And you're going to slam him down on this thing. And then you just rip into him, just pound him as hard as you can for as long as you can until your hands are bloody. That's fine. And here I was trying not to engage. I said one thing to Warlock that day, one thing, which was, how do you know Eddie? And he said, Eddie's from Arizona. I'm from Arizona. I brought him up here to get him into the stunt business. We're both Christians, by the way. We come on these sets, these very dark sets, and we like to share our faith. We like to be a little light here in the darkness. That's why we do these movies. And I thought, that's so funny because I was actually a church-going, kid of faith. But I didn't want anybody to know that I'm playing in a horror film, right? So I made the mistake of looking him in the eye and I said, I'm a Christian too. He said, what? I said, yeah, I'm a Christian. And he yelled across the set of Friday the 13th with all these kids who thought I was nuts and all these crew that I hadn't talked to for 2 weeks. He yells, hey, Eddie, this guy's a brother in Christ. And I was like, I've just been outed. And now people are really going to think I'm whack. But it actually turned into amazing. What's that?
Now they know you're crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But it actually turned into an amazing friendship between me, Dick, and Eddie. And we did have a chance then to sort of, there was a trust and some of the work, the fighting and the special, the martial arts and the work, it got better because then they really invested in me. They felt like, oh, he's really acting. This guy's really good. He's not actually, he's slightly disturbed. He's nothing like this character, which I really, in truth, that wasn't anything like Tommy, but it was such a great role for a young actor to be able to play something so totally different from who I am as a person, and also to do it and try and preserve my faith while being in what would some people say, how could you be in a horror movie being, supposedly a professing religious guy? And it's like, what? I think God's got people everywhere, even on podcasts like this, it's, there's, you can run, but you can't hide, so that was another instance of you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, so.
Well, it's an interesting set to be on if you're, if you're Christian and with all the stuff going on in the woods there.
Exactly.
You said you hadn't seen a Friday the 13th, right? Before you did this?
Right.
Because this one took a different turn than all. This is the only one that doesn't have Jason officially in. I mean, he's in a dream sequence. We got
that. Jason's not in the first one either.
He's not in the first one either.
Right. He jumps out at the end in the boat. Right. Well, I saw that on Friday the 13th, by the way, when it first came out. Okay. So I'm sorry. But he's in the movie because he jumps out of the girl. He takes the girl down. He's the small version of himself, but not the actual killer. So the direction of this one is very just different than all the other ones, right? It takes it's almost, I don't want to say comical isn't the right word, but I mean, my brother John was watching it and he's like, this is almost an airplane movie. Well, and when I thought
it was more like a parody. I thought like watching your performance versus the rest of the cast, it was like almost there were two different movies.
Yeah.
Where you were, I don't know if realistic's the right word, but you were playing it much more intense, and they were almost playing it like my favorite line in the movie after the first person gets killed, and everyone's going through that trauma. They're down at breakfast, and the head guy there says, "Listen, I know we've all been through a lot. Let's have breakfast." I'm like, well, what the hell is that? I mean, it just seemed like. Even like when she goes with the chainsaw and she's like about to get the guy and it runs out and then the little kid up in the loft, it focuses on him. So it was weird. Now I've only seen the first Friday the 13th, so I can't compare it to anything else.
I will.
But that's the vibe that I was getting from it, that you guys were almost a parody of all the movies other than you.
You definitely were.
Yeah.
Well, the
even
first
ending,
kid that gets killed, that whole candy bar thing. he
with the
was doing.
chocolate down his mouth.
Right.
I
right.
sympathize with him.
Yeah.
I mean, that essentially sets the whole thing up. Ultimately, we learn why that kid became so important. But
Right.
it's just, from the series, it's just an interesting one. Now, were you expected to do more of these after this, John? After this?
Yeah, it was. Well, I personally didn't expect to do any more of them, but then was interesting. Danny and Frank Mancuso had told us that they were still working on the ending. They weren't quite sure how to end the movie. And did I have any ideas? I'm certainly welcome to pitch them. I did have a friend of mine named Michael Hitchcock, who's gone on to great success, being in Christopher Guest movies and directing and writing for Glee. But he was a fraternity brother and a friend. He said, well, we should write the end. We should, what if we came up with like Tommy is in the hospital room and he breaks a window and you think he's gone out and then she comes in and he comes out from behind the door. That was Mike Hitchcock and our idea. Wow. The thing that, and I also, by the way, wrote myself about 20 lines for that scene. And I gave them to Danny Steinman and he said, well, first of all, it's a good idea, but what about these lines you've written? You don't talk the whole movie and now you've got a monologue. Cutting that. Yeah. What are all these numbers? I said, I didn't know what those numbers were in the script, so I just added some. He said, those are scene numbers. I had no idea. I was putting in random numbers. But what was really interesting about it was they wanted me then to put the mask on and become Jason. And I was really torn about that. It's like, so am I becoming possessed with the spirit of Jason? Like, yeah, exactly. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But that's what they went with. And then they said, by the way, your character tested well, did well. We want to bring him back for part 6. And they sent me the script for part 6. And I was like, gosh, I always said I'd never do these. And now I'm starring one. It was really fun. And it was super well received. And to go to the Fox Theater in Westwood with, I went to UCLA. So my entire fraternity and a lot of guys from fraternity row and a lot of girls from sorority row. I mean, we packed that place. And it was really fun to see. I had never been to such a participatory experience where people are yelling at the screen. And that is a very campy version of Friday the 13th. There's a lot of comedy. There's a lot of things, big laughs. There's, Junior and his crazy mother. But what worked for me as an actor, sorry.
It's Jason.
Sorry.
Worked for me as an actor. Yeah. When Jason haunts you, he calls on your cell phone. What worked for me as an actor was to not get involved in all that off-camera or on-camera shenanigans that making a Friday the 13th is, which is a lot of kids running around, having a lot of fun all night long in the rain, in a barn out in Camarillo or Calabasas or wherever we were. I stayed totally separate. And so what it did for me was there was a lot of comedy and dance and music. And Danny Steinman was a very interesting director that brought all kinds of different sort of stylistic, I don't know if you've read his filmography, but he'd done like soft porn prior to that. And so there was all this stuff that I just decided I'm the good guy. I'm separate from this. I'm out of this. I'm not a part of this. Just like Tommy was living in his own mind, his own world, haunted by Jason. And it really worked for me. But when they gave me part 6 and said, okay, now you're ongoing in the franchise, I thought, okay, how does that work? And I started to read the first few pages. And first, I'd really gotten much more serious about my faith after Friday the 13th, part 5. And was really struggling with, could I be a Christian in Hollywood and have no control over the kind of parts I was getting? So I'd actually decided maybe I should get out of the business. Maybe I can't do what I love to do. I have to give it up. And when I got that script, the first few pages is a little girl praying. And I went, oh, there's a spiritual dimension to this. Maybe I can do this. And Jason's walking up behind her and she prays and then he walks away. And I was like, oh, and the minute I kind of felt like, oh, I realized, who are you kidding? You're just rationalizing because you want to do another movie. And I knew in my gut, I'm not going to do this film. And I turned it down. I actually quit the business and I went away to seminary. And it's a long story about how I got back into the business, but it was a really defining moment for me. Because it is, looking back now, it's 80s kitsch. I mean, people love the Friday the 13th franchise. I had no idea what I was a part of at the time. To me, it was an acting exercise where I got paid very little money. I worked all night long in the rain. I trained like a banshee. It was very grueling emotionally, spiritually, mentally, but it was really great, obviously, role for me and led to a lot of other good work. So, he was supposed to go on, and actually, I thought that they would come back to me and really beg me to do it because I was so good. But no, they moved right on and just cast a different kid that kind of looked like nobody. Tom, you guys would know part 6. But anyway, long story short, that was my one brush with that franchise, but it has carried on all these years to where I go to conventions and people still come up. Long lines of people say, you're the one Tommy I haven't met, or I don't have your autograph, or I'd love to hear about your. It's really been an interesting and a privilege to be a part of this sort of.
But did you come to that? Because I just watched a documentary on the film and they interviewed a lot of people, and I was very surprised that you weren't part of the interview. So did you choose not to do it, or did they not ask you, or did you come back to embracing this where maybe, because I read some stuff that, what you thought it was going to be and what ended up wasn't quite the same. So did something change, or why weren't you a part of that? I think it was for a DVD release is what it was for.
Yeah. For years after the film came out, I just decided I didn't want anything to do with it. I did a couple of things to promote Friday the 13th and met some of the fans. And I was a little concerned about the impact and influence, the amount of violence and graphic sexual, promiscuity on screen was having on young kids, because not the adults, but I mean, kids would come to some of these things that are 10, 11.
Yeah,
8.
sure.
My brother took me to see this at the drive-in. I love your character. It gave me sort of an added sense of responsibility about the work that I did. And so for years, I decided I'm just going to distance myself. Now that it's been 30 plus years, I'm kind of like, this was a really interesting. Perhaps I've been to, and I meet now the fans, and they're middle-aged housewives and guys like myself that have kids are like, it was just I love horror, it was kind of just good versus evil, and you'd yell at the screen, and I love to be scared, and it was just a fun time. Now I look at the kind of films coming out and I go, okay, that's evil.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When you look at, the thing that struck me about this film, there wasn't a ton of blood. And the way they cut it, even when he would stick the thing in somebody, it was so quick. It was like, it was the violence, although there was a lot of it, it was pretty tame compared to what you see now, where it's so graphic, even the sex scene.
It was less graphic than the very first one. The first one.
Well, there was more deaths in this one, a lot more deaths in this one.
Right, but the first one was much more graphic as far as the kills go. The sex in this one is probably, in the boobage and all that, there was a lot more of that. And
that's what Mancuso wanted. He wanted he said
what, every 8 minutes, I want to see either breasts or a kill, right?
Yeah.
So, but did you know the director had done softcore before you signed up for this one?
No, I mean, and not that, look, I mean, I mean, Danny was a very convincing, persuasive, and he was an actor's director. I mean, I really liked the way that he worked, took time with me. And basically, I walked on the set and he said, John, this is Tommy's movie. You don't have a lot of lines. You play this right, kid, this is your film. And when somebody empowers you, a director gives you that sort of like, wow, this is my movie. I really stepped up to that and felt that sort of responsibility. I also kind of felt like Danny and Frank were both, concerned about body count and how do we up that thing and how do we get an X-ray.
He froze a little bit.
You're freezing a little bit, John.
Focus coming in and out. Kid coming out, just trying to get into all this, and so in that sense, it was a real challenge. It was a real great experience. It was also emotionally taxing because I tried to stay in character like a method actor would the entire time.
Well, what did you? I want to ask you. Look, and you got to be careful what you're going to say, but you did a lot of performing with your eyes, obviously, and your body, not dialogue. But when you look at some of the other cast with the way they were doing some of the dialogue, it was very, some of them were pretty stiff. Do you know what I mean? Do you look at it and go, yeah, some of them were okay compared to what you were doing? You know what I'm saying? I mean, do you look back on it now when you were doing it then? Well, you said you separated yourself, so maybe you didn't even notice. But when you saw the film, did you see a difference? I mean, did it?
No, I mean, and that's what's kind of fun about it being an actor is I'm just about me. The whole movie is about
So you're a complete
me.
narcissist. I get it. No, like an actor.
I'm not.
He said he's an actor.
Exactly.
No, I know.
Don't you know?
Can I say one
Haven't
thing?
you?
When I invited John on this podcast, he said, "Hey, there's nothing more I would like to do than talk about myself for an hour."
Well, you guys know the Screen Actors Guild theme song, right? All about me, life is all about me, not about you. Me, yeah, it goes on from there. Yeah.
One of the things
that was good times being an actor.
One of the things it's funny, John, and thanks for joining, by the way. I actually saw this movie when I was much younger, when it was out in the videotape era, so probably later 80s. My brother was 5 years older than me, and he was more into these films than I was. But after watching the fifth one, it kind of came back to me that I had seen this movie. And, what I really liked about this film, especially since after this one, apparently they're all on Amazon Prime right now. So I actually watched 6 and 7, which I had actually seen before too. This one is just, it's a very different vibe in the sense that it's more of almost like almost Hitchcockian in the sense that, they put forth a lot. No, but seriously, they put forth a lot of red herrings. You start with the EMT, which I actually thought they paused on for a little long.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe he's the guy.
Yeah.
But then they added the crazy son from next door, the drifter who's working for them. They add all these different possibilities and they start getting clipped off. And like you mentioned, there's not a lot of gore. It's like, somebody gets stabbed and they're dead.
Right.
Partially because they don't want to give away who's done it all, as opposed to this. And it had a nice air of mystery in the sense, as opposed to the other one, which was the other films, which were just like, Jason is out there. He's an unstoppable killer. And especially after number 6, because when you talk about them taking a different turn, I mean, Jason gets reanimated by a bolt of lightning because a different Tommy decides it's time to dig him up and burn his body or something. It's really, even as a kid, I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I did like that this one took a real different turn, and you didn't really only saw Jason in Tommy's hallucinations, which I thought was a nice change. And while there definitely is a camp element to the other actors, I really, like I said, I really kind of enjoyed watching this one again, especially after I watched 6 and 7, and I was like, because those two really kind of take it more into almost like a comic book element. Jason is truly undead and unstoppable. And then in the 7th one, a girl with telekinesis shows up and they have kind of like a battle.
Jason versus Carrie.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Well, doesn't he fight Freddy too in one movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Eventually they
and he went to hell. Then he goes to hell.
And New York.
But let's talk about Tommy. I want to get back to Tommy.
Sean, you seem to have a more like overall feeling about the film.
Let me give you my opinion of the series. This is the kookiest of the horror franchises. This is really crazy stuff when you think about it. Because in the first film, it's the mother that's killing everyone.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And why is she killing them? Because the camp counselors let her son die. And then this boy appears at the end and drags the girl at the thing. The next film, Jason is alive. And he's angry that his mother was beheaded at the end of film 1. So he's killing all these people. But mother was only killing people because Jason died. Now you're thinking, well, maybe he didn't die. Just maybe he was horribly disfigured. But in later films, they'll say in 6, they say he had drowned. He was dead. We have to take him back to where he's originally buried. So first film, Jason's really not in it. The second film, Jason is in it, but he's not wearing the trademark, which is the mask. The mask doesn't happen until 3, which was Jason 3D. And the thing that he's most associated with in the series doesn't happen until the 3rd film, which was in 3D. I had seen the first 3.
That's what I stopped after 3.
And then I saw the 4th one, which I thought was really good. I would probably at that time said 4 was the best of them up until the time 4 came out.
That was the final chapter?
Yeah, the final chapter.
And 5 was the new beginning. That was okay. I get it.
Came to this one, which was the last one I saw in the theaters. And I wouldn't say I was a great fan of the series, but it's sort of like I went to the movies every Friday and every Saturday. So if it was out, chances are, I'm going to go to the movies twice. If depending what else open, I was going to see it. And then you think about how weird this one is. In this one, Jason's not in it except as a hallucination, and so in these 5 films, they all have an incredibly different take on it. And this is more like a mystery like the first one too. So it is kind of a new beginning. Now 6, I also watched 6 as well. I watched a lot of these films. So I'd be bad talking about it because I wasn't wise. I didn't make notes. And after you watch 4 of them, it's always like, which girl got stabbed with the harpoon? What film was that? And 6, I would say, and in a real sense, 6 is the first real classic Jason film because it's grim. This one also, as opposed to the other one, there was comedy in 3, but this is one really leaned into the broad, into the comedy and into the broad characters. And 6 is a straight up horror one, very little humor, lots of kills, less nudity than this one.
Yeah.
But then as weird as those first 6 films were and how they relate to each other, then it goes totally nuts. In 7, he's battling a woman with telekinesis. It's Carrie versus Jason. Then he goes to New York, but he's only there for like the last 10 minutes of the movie. Quite a disappointment. And then he's in space.
All right, I forgot about that. 10.
Yeah, he ends up being 200 years in the future on a spaceship.
All right.
Then he goes to hell and he gets pulled out by Freddy Nightmare. And then they have Freddy versus Jason. And then they reboot, and I didn't see the reboot. But these are, when you look at how the characters and how the films are presented, they are really presented in a really odd way. In a sense, this film 6 reminds me of Halloween 3, which didn't have Michael Myers in it.
Oh, with the masks.
Yeah, Season of the Witch.
You mean the fifth with the one we're talking about?
Yeah, the fifth one.
Yeah, this one stands out from all of them because of, like you said, no real
and it did
Jason.
real well.
Yeah,
right? It did really well. Box office.
Did well, but critically, a lot of hardcore fans of the franchise did not like 5 because Jason was an imposter and they felt cheated. It wasn't a supernatural Jason. It was a guy pretending to be. So, of course, I didn't know or realize any of this because, like I said, I'd never seen any before. And afterwards, I didn't see any. I just did mine. But after going to some conventions and being on some panels with different people, you realize people know the lore, they know the mythology, know the characters, they know everyone with who was killed by a harpoon, and this was inconsistent, and this guy did a great job. So part 5 is a unique one, and some people really liked it. Of course, I think it's a cut above.
I get it, a cut above.
But there are a number of people that are like, oh no, it was terrible because it was an imposter and it was a total bait and switch. So it's interesting to hear. People are passionate about their Friday the 13th. So that's always kind of fun when you meet people that know way more about the script and the series and the movie you were in than you do.
Yeah.
So,
Debbie, I haven't heard anything from Debbie yet.
Well, I don't use, this is not the typical film that I've ever, would go to. So I'm really not that, it's a slasher film and, but I'm interested about the Hitchcockian reference, and that is with the mom. Is that where that comes in?
Well, the mom was in 1, 2, and
I think it's just all the twists. There's a bunch of
the red herrings they throw at it.
Red herrings
kind
all
of
over
lead
the
you to
place.
believe that Tommy was the killer.
Right. And then there's, the idea is that there's a possibility of killers. And then there's the central concept of, is he or isn't he the killer? I mean, they set that up pretty early on.
All the masks.
Maybe he's gone crazy. Right. He's got all those masks he makes. Exactly. So that's kind of what I liked. That, it throws out a bunch of possibilities, but at the same time, there's this central question. And almost it's funny too, because as far as screen time is concerned, you're not on the screen for like when they're getting chased by Jason, when the young guy and the woman are getting chased at the very end, and they're seeing all, and then Tommy shows up in the barn door. You're almost like, oh my God, that's right, it's not him. you kind of, it's like a nice little, because you're kind of into that chase sequence because it's
but then I thought he was going to do some kind of karate move on him, and instead he just gets sliced right across the chest. I said, "What the hell was that? Where were all the moves you were doing earlier?"
Well, he thought it made sense though. They set that up because he sees him like 3 times, and he has to close his eyes to make him go away.
I thought he was going to kick
probably
his ass.
thought, "Hey, this is just a hallucination. I'm not crazy." And then he gets macheted.
Now, I want to say what's behind Ralph. You're seeing the scene with the mother and son on the TV.
Oh, yeah.
That is the scene that ruined the movie for Debbie. And I'll tell you why. In the close, they're very dirty, the mother and son.
Yeah.
But in the close-up, when she's talking to him, her face is really clean. And every time they would go to the wide shot, it was really dirty.
Yeah.
And she's
Yeah.
That's the scene that put her over the edge.
I mean, the continuity really messed up for me,
not
too.
the chocolate on the kid's and that now the kid was the whole reason for the killings, right? That kid was the EMT's son, right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Well, they kind of gave it away when he looked at the body and they held it on him.
Well, he stared
and
at
then
him
they
for
faded.
a while. Yeah.
He had a crazed look on his face.
Right.
So you kind of knew he was going to be the guy.
But
when
John,
they had the bald head, I didn't understand that. And then you see the mask peeled open at the end. I was like, oh, he wore a mask behind the mask.
Yeah.
So I thought that was wow.
But John, you were saying they didn't have an ending at that point. You wrote the ending of you in the hospital or that scene.
Right.
Do you know how was it originally going to end? Just with that guy dying and that was it? And then you came up with the idea to have Tommy perhaps be.
I do not remember how the original, or if there was an ending. I just remember they were trying to figure out how do we create a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So that your
for the sequel.
Yeah, for a sequel.
Yeah.
And Mike Hitchcock and I kind of, because we were in that hospital corridor, figured out, you could hear a crash like the glass broke and they rush in and then the door slowly swings shut and he's behind it. But like I said, I'd written this whole monologue about, don't come in here. Please don't come in here. And say to Pamela's saying, Tommy, are you okay? Are you okay? Don't come here. I'm not okay. Too much. Danny Steinman's less is more. Less is more. So
I don't agree with him. I think your instincts were right on that one. It would have been good to have him break out because it was a little ambiguous. Does he become, and as we know, you didn't go on to it. What's that?
You have to watch 6.
Well, I didn't. Which one is Paul? Does Paul Rudd play Tommy in one of these two? Is there other bunch of
who's in 6 with Tommy? Horseshack. Ron Polita.
Is that with Crispin Glover or is that 4?
Crispin Glover's in 4.
4. Okay.
For this.
Right. That's right. Horseshack digs up the thing at the beginning, right? I haven't seen it, but I remember.
I don't think he wants to be known as Horseshack, Ralph. So can we please?
I don't remember.
Jesus.
Now, I have a question for John Shepard.
Go ahead. You got the floor.
Did you say that this friend of yours, Mr. Hitchcock, is he related to Alfred Hitchcock in any way, shape, or form? That was writing the screenplay?
No,
situation?
but it's a great observation. No, he has no relation, but in that sense, the film truly was Hitchcockian.
Yeah.
Exactly. That would be the only. I think that would be the only.
Listen, I do not want to undermine this movie in any way, but the connection to Hitchcock is just driving me a little crazy here. Okay,
we can't.
Let's just clarify.
Watch that scene.
It's not to Alfred Hitchcock. It's to Michael.
That's right. Okay.
Hey,
fair enough.
And
that's funny.
Yeah, no, Michael's the other guy that when I got the role, I kind of felt conflicted. Can I do this? I mean, here I am studying at Strasberg and doing Shakespeare and classically trained at Northwestern and Second City. And he was like, John, this is a great opportunity, but if you're going to do it, you got to take it seriously. You got to go volunteer at a mental health clinic and understand what it is to be in a mind of a kid like that. You've got to get dirt underneath your fingernails. You want to take it seriously. Do the best job. If you're going to do Tommy, be the best Tommy you can be. Coming from a guy who was just slightly older than me, but he was a director, he was a writer. It really kind of, again, said, don't think of this as a Friday the 13th. Think of this as To Kill a Mockingbird. You're Robert Duvall, Boo Radley. Take it seriously. And dang, and when I watch the movie, I enjoy it because I kind of go, yeah, I'm proud of the work that I did. And that was,
so they made it sound like you didn't know you were doing a Friday the 13th and you went to the mental institution to study. Then you found out it was Friday the 13th and you felt like, oh, why did I do this studying? But you knew what you were going to be playing. When you did the research.
I don't remember. It's been a while now. I don't remember the order of when I exactly found out. But the minute that I got those sides where I knew it was a kid coming out of the...
Okay.
I started preparing because that's what we did at Strasbourg. We'd write character histories and, we would definitely...
That's Jason's mother.
Yeah. I should turn this off.
You keep in touch with any of the cast? Do you have any? Do you keep in touch with?
I reunited with a couple of them, Miguel Nunez, for sure, and the kid who played Reggie. We corresponded several times. I went to a couple of the years later, not immediately after the movie, but 20 years later, I did a couple of conventions and saw Corey at one of them. So yeah, I have stayed in touch, but mainly when they did a Friday the 13th reunion, I thought, well, that'd be fun to go to and see everybody again. And saw Tiffany and a few of the others. And it was really fun to sort of get on the other side of, because like I said, during the movie, I didn't talk to any of them.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, I mean, you're doing method for the film. You're being very serious. How did
they obviously weren't.
Yeah. How did the other actors treat you? I mean, other than the fact that you were trying to separate yourself, but were they saying, why is this guy taking this so seriously? Did you get any sense that they're looking at you as like, what the hell's he doing? This is, how did that go? Was it, did it help? I mean, did it keep you enough distance so that you could get into that role of just kind of looking at what's going on? And
oh yeah, no, I mean, I literally, guys, would be off to myself, the makeup people, hair. I have 1 or 2 word answers at most, never look at anybody. And then, we'd be done at 2:00 in the morning or 5:00 in the morning. And I would then drive home. And of course, you'd been drinking coffee all night. So then I'd go sit on the beach in Malibu and try and get tired. Or one time I showed up I was dating a girl at UCLA and I showed up outside her sorority. It was like 7:30 in the morning. And it was a Saturday morning. They were all sound asleep, but she happened to come out and look out her balcony. And I was standing out on the street in a trench coat with black under my eyes.
Oh, Lord.
And she was like, well, what's wrong with this?
Still in character.
Romeo and Juliet.
He's stalking me.
Oh my goodness.
It was fun to do that role because it was so different from who I am. And I really did get into it. But I was ready to put Tommy to bed after part 5. So
don't you think your life would have been considerably different if you had done the second one? Because then you would be part 2 of the 3 trilogy, of Tommy.
My life. Yeah, I could have made, I think, a career out of it. I could have gone and pitched, let me write the next one. We wrote the ending to this one. Let me and Hitchcock come up with a pitch. But it was interesting that you asked that, Sean, because my life did change because I turned down part 6. I was living in Malibu. I ran out of money. I moved to North Hollywood, which if you live in California, you know the difference between Malibu and North Hollywood. It was significant. I got a job at the LA Times rolling advertisements in the paper on Sundays. I got paid per paper, not by the hour. So I made like $1.95 an hour because I was so slow. I went to seminary and decided I'm going into ministry. I'm getting out of acting because I don't think I can be in this business. And it was during that first quarter of seminary that I was at church and a guy came up to me and he said, "You're an actor, right?" And I said, "No, I used to be, not anymore." By the way, when you went to the seminary, you had to sign a piece of paper that said you wouldn't go to R-rated films. Friday the 13th was playing in the drive-in across the street from the seminary. And I said, well, it doesn't say anything about being in R-rated films, just says I can't go to them. But it was the weirdest time of my life where I gave it all up. And then an actor came up to me at church and said, "I just read for a movie. I bet you'd be perfect. I bet you get it. I'll bet you get it." And sure enough, I did. I went to Amsterdam that summer and did the second kind of film I swore I'd never do, which is I got cast in a Christian film for the Reverend Billy Graham. So I went from Friday the 13th, I'll never do a slasher picture, to, oh, now I'm going to do a lame, cheesy Christian film. But it was, both of them turned out to be much better experiences than I could have possibly imagined. And how my life would have been different if I'd taken part 6. I'd have still been in Malibu. I'd never gone to Amsterdam. I wouldn't have traveled the world with that film. They flew my girlfriend over. We got engaged. We've been married now forever. So it's just really interesting how things work out. And you think, my gifts, I can't use my gifts to do what I want to do because somehow it's unholy. It's not sacred. It's dishonoring to God. And, I'm going to give it up. And then God turns around and says, okay, now I can use you in the entertainment industry. And now I'm producing. It's this bizarre journey. I thought I was, going to be
proud list of films.
Yes.
Before you called me, he called me about a project. Mm-hmm. Before he called me, I knew who you were, because it's a very small circle. And I know I tried to pitch you with a project, years ago, but I didn't have your email. So at that time I was using Hollywood Creative Directory, find people's email. I didn't have IMDb Pro, and you might not have been in it at that time. But so when you called me, and I was at a concert with my wife, and I'm like, oh, there's a person. I got the headphones on. Listen, John Shepard. Oh, I know who he is. And then I had to call you back immediately because I knew who you were and that you were Tommy. And you said, thanks for calling me back so quickly. I go, how could I not call back Tommy from?
That's right. Yeah, you never know. He might show up at your house with a machete, or
when you threw that kid on the table there in that movie, I turned to Debbie and said, I can never cross him.
No, the physicality was obvious. It was obvious in that. I'm just trying to. How much time was in between the movie, the seminary, and then getting back into films? How much time did you actually take to just kind of?
Gosh, it wasn't that long. I would say about 6 months. I didn't do part 6. I ran out of money. I moved to North Hollywood. I enrolled in seminary. I was in my first quarter of seminary when I was going to this church, and then I'd say it was only about 6 months. And it was funny because when I went in for the audition for that, I thought, well, I'm never going to get this because they're going to see I did a Friday the 13th with all that graphic nudity and violence, and they're not going to like that. Instead, the director was like, this is fantastic that you came from there and now you're going to do this, and you're a real actor, not, a lot of times in religious entertainment, you get people that the quality is not up to snuff, or just because they're doing it because they feel like, well, it doesn't have to be that good. It's for God. It's like, actually, it's got to be better. And one of the things I appreciate about Sean is I had read one of his scripts and wanted to get this thing going and revive. And I feel like there are people that are people of faith that have strong moral and ethical and spiritual compasses, but they also are really great at what they do. And I think that's where I want to be in that circle of, I want to do stuff that's artistically excellent. I want to do stuff that's commercially responsible. And I also want to do stuff that's on mission. And when those 3 circles intersect, and that's where kind of I think Sean Paul Murphy plays too, that's the sweet spot, is to do great entertainment, artistically excellent, on mission, but that also makes money. That's a win-win-win. So that's why, Friday the 13th filled out a couple of those, but not all 3 for me. So
I will say, he does not make cheesy crap. John has made some really.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've made some cheesy stuff too. Yippee-Ki-Yay.
Shepard, you are so kind. But
yeah, thank you very much for that.
Yes,
by the way,
very nice. But John Shepard, I got one other question for you. Do you think that when you were in that mental hospital doing your research on your role, that had something to do with you getting called to be going to the mission, or not the missionary, the
Seminary?
Seminary. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
That's a great, no one's ever asked me that question. And it's interesting that you say that, because I remember when I quit, because I'd been volunteering there for about a month, and you would go and spend a lot of time with these kids and really get to know them. And they became your friends. They liked you. In some cases, I was like a big brother that they never had. And then I felt a little guilt and conviction when movie, and I'm leaving. And they didn't know that. They thought I was helping, and I did genuinely care, and I did genuinely get involved, and I did feel legitimately convicted that I was going to leave these kids here that had no family, that had been suffered all kinds of abuse. And I would say, great question. I've never thought about that, but yeah, I think in many ways I felt, again, a responsibility that art matters and that what we do impacts people on a deep level. And, you know, we have a certain responsibility as artists. And sometimes you make something that's just a popcorn, it's just for entertainment. But sometimes it can have very positive or very negative long-term impact on people. And so that's why I think also, Ralph, to answer your question, I disappeared from the circuit for a while, but now I feel coming back gives me an opportunity to sort of redeem a little bit my time I invested in this franchise, to say, you know, it was a great journey. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Here's what I learned. And I've met lots of people of faith that go to horror films, and some of them whose dad was a pastor or they're pastors, but they just loved it. It was fun. It was 80s kitsch. There are other people that it really impacted in a negative way. And I have to say, I'm sorry. It was just a movie, but I recognize not everybody sees this as just a movie. It does sometimes have long-term lasting influence.
Well, you're part of one of, I mean, look at, there's a bunch of iconic franchises in Hollywood history. Friday the 13th is one of them. I mean, whatever you think about the movies in general, they're iconic, and that's always going to be there for the rest of your life. You're part of that. That's a pretty amazing thing. I mean, I do think that's pretty cool.
Well, here's the thing. If you look at like my wife, oddly enough, well, I'm not going to say the name.
Take my wife, please. If you look at my wife.
Movie with Gunnar Hansen from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And, you know, in the horror world, it's like a, and she was also with the King of Gore. Who was that guy?
Gordon Lewis.
Gordon Lewis was his name. The Godfather, Herschel Gordon.
Godfather of Gore.
Herschel Gordon Lewis. And
Debbie dated him. What are you saying? Debbie dated that guy?
No, she was.
Stupid.
Oh, I got confused. Sorry.
A friend of ours needed he needed somebody, and I was working at Union Memorial Hospital.
And she wanted to be an actress. And then she saw the final movie.
I didn't want to be an actress. I just was going to have some fun.
That's why you were in Death of Poe and Creepy Canada as well?
To help out.
Okay.
They needed somebody.
But one thing Gunnar Hansen said, he didn't say this to me, he said it to the director. It's like, you know, he goes, you know, I may not like be an Oscar-winning actor, but when I tell people what movie I was in, they all know it.
Yeah.
You know? If you say you're in Friday the 13th, people are wondering,
yeah,
the 13th.
Which one?
Yeah. You know, but they will know when you say Friday the 13th, they will know.
Well, I'm impressed by not being seduced by what it means to be in a film, and the fact that you could have gone on and done anything you wanted to do probably, but your strength was in your faith. And, you know, it's pretty amazing to walk away from something like that and go do what you did. And then it's also amazing to come back and still do that, tap into what you love, which is getting in front of people and acting, but use it, you know, the way you want to use it, which is pretty good. It's a great story. Now, do you go to all these conventions that they have for all these horror conventions that you go and sign stuff, or you don't get involved with that?
I never did it until the last couple of years, where it's been a privilege again to go. And a lot of them are 80s type conventions.
Yeah.
So it's not just horror. So you'll be there with Judge Reinhold from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, or you'll be there sitting next to, you know, other celebrities from movies like
Hellraiser
you know, it's been fascinating to meet some of the icons of the world, and especially those 80s movies, which we grew up, you know, loving those films from the 80s, all the John Hughes stuff, and to see some of the actors and to actually have been a part of that. I mean, even Corey Feldman, I mean, he's kind of a legendary, like him or not. I mean, he's been a part of the fabric of Hollywood, and it's great to sort of be a part of that in some small way, and have had my 15 minutes of fame doing this. But it's also really cool because now as an actor, you know, you're always asking permission to do your job. Please hire me. Please let me be in your movie, Mr. Producer, so I can say the words somebody else wrote. But what's really been cool for me is to be able to transition from just being a prop in somebody else's movie as an actor to actually being able to now cultivate talent, have scripts written, produce, and have the ability to give permission to people to do their jobs. It's really much more creatively satisfying, although it's a lot harder than being an actor. Acting was the easiest, most fun I've ever had. And to pretend to be somebody else is just and to get paid for it. I mean, I would have paid to do what I was doing. It was just amazing, but it's been a fun journey. And it's also been, as you said, Johnny, Ralph, a great way to tell my story and encourage and inspire others, because now you've got this next generation of kids that are able to make Friday the 13th on their iPhone, and they're doing it at a higher production level for less money.
That's for
with
sure.
Great, better special effects. It's phenomenal. And they're also,
I hate those kids, by the way. No offense, but those little guys are doing all kinds of stuff.
Well, the one thing they're missing that Sean offers is you still, it comes down to story. You've got to be able to tell the story. If it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. That's true. So the writing is the one thing this next generation is missing. They can shoot, they can edit, they can direct, they can do visual effects, they can put it all on their iPhone, but it still comes down to, at the end of the day, who wrote the script? Well, Sean Paul Murphy wrote the script. Oh, wow. Or I wrote it myself. Yeah, you did. So it's all still about how do you tell a good story?
Right.
Yep.
John, let me ask you a question, because you seem to have some high praise for your director, but from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was his last film that he directed. Why do you think he never directed anything else after this? Why didn't the Friday the 13th franchise, if it did so well, why didn't they let him direct more of these? Do you know?
I do not know. I can only speak from my experience with that machine, which, look, I was getting paid scale to play Tommy for 8 weeks in a barn. And when I was offered part 6, my agent, just to test the water, said, yeah, he'll do it, but he wants double scale this time. And there is no loyalty. There is no love lost. If somebody asks for anything beyond the minimum, they were like, oh, it's done, moving on, we'll replace him. And I'm sure with Danny, the thing about these, it's a volume game. This franchise, it didn't matter about continuity. It didn't matter that one director did a great job. It really was, they get made for this amount of money, they make this amount of money. And then we move on. And if somebody wants to keep doing with them, great. But if they don't want to play ball, we don't need them. The franchise is bigger than any of you actors or you directors. I'm not quite sure why Danny, maybe, working with me drove him to the point of, I never want to work again. I don't know.
I can't stand those method actors. I can't stand them.
Maybe it was such an honor that he just felt anything to do as a.
How can,
it was
how
like
can you top
Citizen
that
Kane.
bar?
He peaked.
The bar's too high. Set the bar too high.
Since you brought up Hitchcock, I'll bring up Orson Welles. What the hell?
So, John, I have a question, because I know this was in Paramount's slate. This wasn't The Godfather. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and your awareness, and I know you're an actor, how involved was the studio? I mean, were they like giving notes? Were they looking at the dailies and making comments? Or was it just Mancuso?
I do not know the behind the scenes of that, but my experience was that because we were a low budget, trying to be under the radar, non-union production, Paramount couldn't put their name on it. It was like a negative pickup where we're off making this for repetition at Frank Mancuso's company, and then we turn it into the studio. So I don't think that they were very involved. However, when it came to body count, on
the documentary I saw, they said the director said they wanted a body count
to make sure that it wasn't too far over. I think Danny did want to push the envelope. I think they did have to dial some things back. That's where I think they got involved in post-production and in the editing, but nothing on the set or anything. It was, in fact, I can give you an example. One day I showed up on the set and it was freezing cold, and I noticed my co-star had a brand new full-length park on. I was like, where'd she get that? And it's like, oh, the producers gave it to her. It's like, well, I'm freezing. But I couldn't, I was in character. I wasn't going to ask, but everything was, I did notice Mancuso had a new Ferrari one day, and I just went, wow, okay, now I understand how this works.
Oh, man.
So, anyway. That's my
a friend of ours, a former podcast guest, used to do some work for Mancuso and his company. And one thing she said about him was that his people were very loyal to him. He still has the same people when she was working with him around him that were around him from 12, 14 years earlier on the Friday the 13th picture. So he must be doing something right if he's holding on to the same people and all.
Sure. Well, keep it in the family. Don't want anybody talking.
Exactly.
And this did well. He made good money.
Yeah.
You know, the reviews weren't great, but everybody still showed up to see it.
Critics didn't like it.
Really like it. Some people really like it.
Yeah.
I read one critic, and I think he was right. He said, who was ranking all the films, said this is the most divisive of the Friday the 13th films because people really like it or they don't like it. Yeah. One thing that is universally true, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, John, people liked you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get high marks for the film, even from people that didn't like the concept of the movie, that are like disappointed that Jason wasn't in it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it was, like I said, it was a great honor, and I'm proud of the work.
Well, listen, you get to come on this show, so it must be good, huh? Right. Things must have been good. Oh my goodness!
I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I think you've peaked.
I don't know how much further you can go from here. Actually.
I guess you guys probably won't want to do another podcast like Danny Steinman after this one. You're probably done as well, right? Is this?
I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how this goes.
I think we've plateaued. This is our Citizen Kane, John.
we got to see how the weekend box office goes with this one. So
we got to see how many subscriptions we get and likes, and how many people smash. I mean, literally smash the like button.
There you go.
And so not only this, John Shepard. It's no wonder to me why your name is John Shepard.
That is interesting.
You know?
Well, like a good shepherd, it's probably time to get the flock out of here.
There you go. I did tell you it was an hour. John, we appreciate
John,
thank you so much. With us. This was great.
Thanks
really
very much
appreciate
for coming
it.
on.
And I appreciate that you came on. It's the holiday weekend.
Yeah. It's a tough week, but
I hope you and your family have a great Thanksgiving.
You said I owed you big time, and so there is no getting out of this.
Oh, you gave him enough publicity tonight, John. Don't worry, you paid him back.
Yeah,
right?
He's smiling from ear to ear. Yeah,
thank you for the kind words, John.
Right.
We're even.
I will say one thing. John and I really did bond over our many conversations. I think we spent many hours on the phone.
We felt like we made a horror film together. So there you go.
You know, all these podcasts that sometimes turn into a therapy session.
Yes, definitely.
John was my therapist. And he did the impossible too. He got a deal together that would have probably never happened without him. Wow. You know, so he is a great producer. You know, he's done some really great work. And I'm happy to have done something with him.
A peacemaker, a truly great peacemaker.
Yes.
There you go. Well, good job.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thanks to you.
Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.